All right. So today we're going to look at which AWS certification is right for you. This is going to be a short presentation where we're going to focus mostly on your questions and on what you would like to learn today. So basically, I'm going to start the session off by taking a moment and waiting if anybody has any questions. I want to start with getting a bit of insight into why you joined this session. So if you have any questions, if you have anything you want to ask before we start, that's definitely a right time right now. So just type your questions into the Q&A section. I'll do a short overview of what we're going to be looking at today so that can help you ask the right question. If you want to ask a question, there's no need to ask the question, of course. So today we're going to look at the certification itself. We're going to look at all the 10 certifications that are available from AWS. We're going to look at the learning paths that are defined for each of those certifications. And we're going to look at what to focus on if you want to certify for a certain sort of certification. We're also going to look at accelerated learning, where we provide services in training to individuals and companies where we take your personal requirements. We want to see what kind of goal you have, and then we can outline a learning path that actually allows you to accelerate your learning, accelerate the achievement towards your AWS certification. We're also going to look at tips and tricks, which is going to show you what to look out for when you go for the actual certification, what the common mistakes are and what the best practices are. And then at the end of this presentation, we have a Q&A session where we're going to focus more on questions. All right, I'm going to pause a bit here and just look at the Q&A if there's any questions that anybody wants to raise before we start this presentation. We really want to sort of lead the presentation into the right direction so that we answer your questions beforehand, possibly. All right, so let's look at the certification overview. So essentially, AWS has 10 different exams that you can take right now, right? We got the classic associate and professional level. This is where it all started with the solutions architect, and then later with the Sis Ops and the developer associate certifications leading into the Devops certification itself. But AWS added the foundational course for cloud practitioners exam, sorry, not course. So the foundational exam is designed so that it tests your knowledge of AWS services. With the foundational exam, what you have to demonstrate is that you somehow are aware of what the AWS features are, right? So the Cloud Practitioner exam defines that you are working with the AWS Cloud in any kind of role where you have contact with AWS Cloud. You don't really need to know how to build virtual machines and spin up instances of containers and create this and that inside of the AWS Cloud. Literally, what you have to know for Cloud Practitioner is what AWS is, what the services do, and just real basics on how it functions. The recommended knowledge for the foundational Cloud Practitioner exam is 6 months of work with AWS. So within 6 months, you can get a rough idea of what AWS is, and you can get a rough idea of how it works, etc. Now, we're going to be looking at all of these certifications and talk about, oh, you need to have so much and so much experience, right? This is because the certifications are designed to show your competency, right? We're not looking to show that you attended the course and then you were able to pass the certification. It is not how it works with AWS. The AWS certifications, they actually aim to show that somebody who holds this certification is able to actually do that role. So for example, somebody with a Sis Ops certification is able to manage and work with AWS systems, right? Somebody with a Devops Engineering certification is able to create a DevOps environment, manage a DevOps environment, somehow interact with the DevOps environment, and understand the features that are available within AWS for DevOps. So the associate tier starts with sort of the first level of real hands-on certification. Cloud Practitioner, it's just we know about it and we are working with it. You could be in a sales role, you could be in a management role, you could be in a very sort of disjointed technical role, like for example desktop support, and still be able to pass the Cloud Practitioner as long as you have enough contact with AWS so that you understand services. Whereas the associate certifications, they're more designed to show that you are able to work with AWS in a specific role. So there's 3 specific roles here. First is the Solutions Architect Associate. Now the Solutions Architect Associate, this role is designed to sort of give you certification on you being able to understand and architect solutions in the AWS cloud. With the architecting, it's sort of split into 2 pieces. One is the associate and one is the professional role. They're both solutions architect certifications, and the professional just gives sort of an advanced level of knowledge, advanced degree of features in AWS. The associate certification covers the basics, covers sort of how the cloud works, what the main features of the cloud are, whereas with the professional certification, we talk about services that are quite advanced compared to the associate ones. For the associate, the expected level of experience is 1 year of actually working and implementing solutions on AWS, right? So that is next to any industry experience that you might have or might need to be able to get to a point where you start using AWS. For the professional tier, 2 years of comprehensive experience, 2 years of troubleshooting solution, 2 years of actually operating business applications that are in production on the AWS cloud. So as you can see, going through foundational certification, going through Cloud Practitioner to associate to professional, it is a path that takes a bit of time. It's not something that's going to happen getting out of a course, right? We are going to talk about how to do accelerated learning, but we still need to get that experience in. Nothing really will replace your experience with the cloud. So the 2 other specialty associate certifications are the Sis Ops Administrator. This is a certification that is designed for people who work with AWS and manage systems. Now, the Sis Ops Administrator has to know all the services, but at a level where they're comfortable deploying them, they're comfortable handing them over to developers or handing them over to engineering teams who will actually be configuring them, right? So Sis Ops Administrator is kind of a jack of all trades of AWS, right? And the Sis Ops Administrator role is then upgraded to a Devops Engineer role. It's sort of combined with the developer role. So essentially with the developer associate, you demonstrate that you can develop applications in AWS. And for both of these associate certifications, again, you need 1 year of experience of actually managing services in AWS or deploying applications and developing applications inside of the cloud. Both of these lead to DevOps Engineer Professional. Now, the DevOps Engineer Professional certification is sort of proving that you know how to use DevOps tools inside of AWS. Maybe it even proves that you are using non-AWS tools in AWS, but you have automated the environment and you know how to use features like infrastructure as code and features like CI/CD inside of the AWS cloud. If you are at that level, if you're a DevOps engineer, you should be able to sort of pass that exam with 2+ years experience inside of AWS. So these are sort of the base certifications that anybody looking to get certified should be looking to definitely pass, right? Cloud Practitioner, it's a good option if you're going straight from zero to hero, straight from cloud, nothing in cloud to big data in cloud, for example, right? Otherwise, if you are an architect, if you are architecting solutions, if you do engineering, if you lay out plans, then the architecting track. And then, of course, if you're an administrator or you operate environments, then the Sis Ops track is for you. And if you're a developer, definitely developing, the developing track is for you, which, of course, both lead into Devops Engineering, where essentially an advanced administrator and an advanced developer will meet and their roles will overlap greatly. We now also have 5 specialty exams, right? So the specialty exams are designed to prove that you have competency over a specific area within AWS. Now, all of the specialty exams, they require 5 years of experience with AWS, right? So this is a very advanced level of experience. And we're looking at certificates that are designed to really focus on a very, very niche area within AWS. Like, for example, the Advanced Networking Specialty is designed to show that you are able to create any kind of network configuration, that you're able to combine a local enterprise-grade environment with an AWS environment and create a hybrid cloud. It shows that you know how to do security on the network. It shows that you know how to scale your network performance, etc. The whole exam has questions solely on networking. There's probably maybe 10 questions that are based on security. Everything else is on networking. So if you want to go for the Advanced Networking Specialty certification, you have to look at the networking and really get deep into networking. This is a really cool exam for somebody who's been in the industry for a long time. So for example, you work with network equipment in your company, you go for the Cloud Practitioner exam to sort of get a baseline of understanding of AWS services, and then you focus solely on the network because you want to stay in that network sort of focused role, right? So after a few years working with AWS, you decide, yeah, it's time to go for the Advanced Networking Specialty. You might even be able to do it in a much shorter manner. With the Advanced Networking Specialty, the 5 years experience is mostly 5 years of experience with networks in general, because you have to know principles that are ubiquitous to all kinds of networks. Like, for example, you have to know IP addressing, you have to know differences between IPv4, IPv6, you have to know BGP routing, you have to know AS configurations and numbers and things like that. Next to networking, we got the big data specialty. Again, another very focused niche certification, which shows that you are able to configure systems that will ingest data, that will transform data, and that will output that data or visualize it or provide it for analysis to other systems. You have to understand what kind of analytic options are available in AWS. You have to understand what kind of features AWS supports for different types of big data services. Like, for example, you have to know how to capture data into a data lake, what kind of service is best to provide a data lake, and then what kind of features do you have for streaming data? What kind of features are you able to use to process data inside of your environment, and how big data ties into services like IoT and machine learning, etc. Again, 5 years of experience required, 2 of those on AWS, so that you really have deep insight into AWS. I would say big data or advanced networking are good sort of next step certifications for a professional that's already achieved their solutions architect professional or a DevOps engineer professional. Both of those are sort of crucial to certain roles, and of course, they can be a good next step for a certain type of engineer. So the third one that's also like that is security. So security essentially is a specialty that shows that you are proficient in how security is done in AWS, the best practices on security. This exam focuses exclusively on providing security, how to deploy your applications so that they're secure, so that you can identify users, so that you can manage the users inside of the environment, etc. It also covers network security with advanced knowledge of network tools, with advanced knowledge of tools that provide security for your environment required inside of this certification. Again, with the security specialty, we got 5 years experience, 2 of those on AWS. Again, it's a good sort of certification that leads to a next tier from the professional, right? So if you're a DevOps engineer, security sort of is now becoming an integral part of DevOps. So security specialty shows that you are really a proper DevOps engineer, right? A proper DevOps engineer means somebody who is not just creating DevOps tools and using them, but is also thinking about security as you develop, right? Security is also a good next step for a solutions architect professional so that you can build and design solutions that are secure from the get-go. There's 2 new certifications that just were released last year. One is the machine learning specialty. So the machine learning specialty focuses on you understanding and knowing the way machine learning is done in AWS and knowing how to use machine learning tools in AWS. It requires, again, 5 years of industry experience. Now, this one does not really specify that, again, like the advanced networking, doesn't really specify that any of those need to be inside of AWS. It sort of works towards, you've been working with machine learning, you know how to use AWS machine learning services. They're essentially based on open source services. Okay, try and go for the machine learning specialty exam. And another one is Alexa Skills Builder. This is a very, very niche specialty for developers that work with Alexa skills, that build Alexa skills to show that they're proficient in that sort of delivery of Alexa skills. The Alexa Skill Builder is the only certification that right now does not have a learning path. So essentially it is, you know Alexa skills, you know how to build them, go for the certification and pass. So since I'm talking about learning paths, let's take a look at the learning path for each of those certifications. We're going to start with the practitioner learning path. So the practitioner learning path is a self-learning option, basically, right? So you have a Cloud Practitioner Essentials. It's a 4-hour class. This 4-hour class is digital, so you get it on aws.training. You can start anytime, go at your own pace. You can pause and slowly learn about the AWS tools. Once you've gone through the Cloud Practitioner Essentials, you have to gather at least 6 months of experience with AWS Cloud, according to AWS, and of course, go for the Cloud Practitioner exam. Cloud Practitioner exam is a short 1.5-hour exam. It's got, I think, 60 questions. And with those 60 questions, you prove your understanding of the AWS cloud, understanding of what it means to run in the cloud, of shared responsibility, of basic identity and access management and things like that. There is the AWS Technical Essentials that has a bit of enhanced learning. So AWS Technical Essentials, because it's not just a theoretical course like the Cloud Practitioner, it's a one-day course that really covers services in a little bit more detail and gives you 3 labs that you can actually do while the course is running, where you build a highly available application that is auto-scalable and has a highly available database backend. Three-tiered application is what you build in this course. So this is something to consider if you're looking for a little bit of an advanced approach, a little bit of an advanced, enhanced classroom learning that will lead eventually into you getting certified as Cloud Practitioner. Now, again, nobody said that doing the Cloud Practitioner course is a prerequisite for the Cloud Practitioner exam, and nobody said that you're going to pass the Cloud Practitioner exam if you listen to 4 hours of theory, right? So there is definitely a bit of learning involved with each and every AWS certification. And that, of course, is key when we talk about AWS certifications, right? It takes 6 months to get the basic certification. It takes 6 months to get the sort of minimum recognition where AWS says, yeah, here you go. Here's your Cloud Practitioner certificate. Now, we can speed up those 6 months, and we're going to talk about how to speed up that time with accelerated learning that we offer at WebAge. But next, let's look at the associate tiers. So here is the Solutions Architect Associate tier. Here is sort of the baseline that you need to cover to get all of these courses in, right? So basically, the prerequisite for going into the Solution Architect track is the Cloud Practitioner exam or taking the AWS Technical Essentials class. Why is this a prerequisite? Because at the start of the Architecting on AWS class, terminology is sort of starting to be discussed that is presented in the Technical Essentials or that a Cloud Practitioner should know about, right? We don't really go into details about what each term means. So essentially, we use that terminology right from the get-go. And the Architecting on AWS class is the class that will align with the knowledge required to pass the exam. Now, once you've gone to the Architecting on AWS class, this is a 3-day classroom course. You're ready to start working with AWS. You are not ready to pass the exam. For sure, nobody was going to be ready to pass the exam if they go to Architecting on AWS and then next week schedule an exam for their Solutions Architect Associate certification. You might be able to pass. You might be lucky, right? You might be able to have enough experience already, but the class is not designed to be an exam prep class. So after you got your Architecting on AWS, you got 1+ years experience designing applications, architecting applications on AWS. Then to make sure that you're going to pass the exam, you can take the Exam Readiness course. So the Exam Readiness course is a 1-day course that overviews the exam, overviews the domains of the exam, and of course lets you sort of test out your knowledge and see whether you're ready to go for that Certified Solutions Architect Associate exam. So this is basically what we'll see in a lot of these courses is you get a course that primes you with the knowledge required to eventually pass the exam, but that course is designed to teach you how to use those services instead of teach you how to pass the exam, which is always a better option if you ask me, because once you're at the exam, once you've gone through that 1 year experience, you're actually capable of operating the cloud. You're actually capable of building applications and developing applications in the AWS cloud. Next is the Developer Associate. Again, this one starts with a Cloud Practitioner or Technical Essentials. It leads into developing on AWS. Once you're gone through the classroom course for developing on AWS, then again, you need to have a year's experience developing applications on AWS. And then again, you've got an Exam Readiness course for the Associate tier. This one sort of gives you a better idea of whether you're going to be ready to pass the exam, whether you have the knowledge required to pass the exam. You then schedule an exam, you get certified as an AWS Certified Developer Associate. And Associate tier number 3 is the Sis Ops Admin. Starts again the same with the Practitioner and Technical Essentials. We got Sis Ops Admin on AWS. We got the exam readiness course, and then you go for the certificate. Again, between the Sis Ops administrating on AWS and the actual exam, you should have a year's experience. And that year's experience is going to give you the ability to absorb the knowledge that you learned in the courses and actually put it to use. Nothing really replaces putting that knowledge to use unless it's a focused session like we're going to talk about later in this chapter. So the professional tier, after you've done the associate tier used to be a requirement. Now it's not. So if you feel happy, if you've worked with AWS solutions for 2 or more years and have gone through the exam readiness for the architect professional course and feel ready, you can go and directly skip and take the professional exam, right? But the learning path for the professional exam starts with a Solutions Architect Associate certification, right? You're an associate. Then you take the Advanced Architecting course. It's another 3-day classroom course. Then you add another year of experience designing applications. So altogether, you'll now have 2 years or more experience designing applications on AWS. And before taking the exam, you can take the exam readiness course for the Solutions Architect Professional. Similarly, with the Devops Engineer, the Developer Associate or SysOps Associate is a requirement. Well, used to be a requirement, but is recommended now. You take the Devops Engineering on AWS. The Devops Engineering gives you sort of the tools that you need to use to start building DevOps environments in AWS. A year after that, you got 2 years experience on the DevOps in a DevOps role. You go for the exam readiness class. You check that you're ready to pass, and you go for the Certified DevOps Engineer Professional certification. Next, we got the Specialty learning path. So we got the Big Data Specialty learning path here. This one sort of skips over a lot. It says, okay, go for data fundamentals and then start with the big data on AWS course. Well, one thing that it's missing is you have to have some background in data science, right? You got to have some background in big data. You got to have some background in using analytics tools, ingestion tools, processing tools, streaming, etc. They say optionally take the Certified Cloud Practitioner. Yeah, Cloud Practitioner is a good idea to have sort of as a baseline where you are assured that you have the right experience to go into big data on AWS. I would say big data on AWS is really good for somebody who's already a professional, either DevOps or architect, because the big data on AWS really kicks off with a lot of terminology, a lot of features that we discuss in the big data on AWS course. You got to know them really well. You got to know S3. You got to know how to work with EC2 instances. And those really are not covered in the data fundamentals, data analytics fundamentals, and they're not covered in enough detail, in my opinion, in the Certified Cloud Practitioner courseware or learning path. So I would say add a recommendation in here between the fundamentals and the big data on AWS to be at least an associate developer or SysOps or architect. Then you got the big data on AWS course, a 3-day course. I would say 3.5-day course because there's so much content, maybe even 4. It is really, really intense course. It has really good content, right? But there is so much content that a lot of the times I see students coming into the big data on AWS course and they're just overwhelmed with the amount of data that we're sort of giving them, right? They're like, yeah, I'm interested in using Athena, right? I'm interested in doing ad hoc analytics. Yeah, well, you're going to have to learn. You're going to have to wait for 2 days because the first 2 days, we're not even going to touch Athena, right? The first 2 days, we're going to talk about basics of big data, capturing data, analyzing data, storing data temporarily, storing data permanently, what our options are, data warehousing, and then we're going to slowly get to a point where we have the data and we can use tools like Athena to analyze that data. With big data on AWS, 5 years experience in the data science field, 2 of those spent on AWS is a requirement before you're ready to go for the exam, right? I've seen students come in and say, yeah, I have no experience with AWS. I'm looking to go for the big data on AWS course from the get-go without getting any baseline. And then next week, I'm going to go for the big data certified specialty exam. And then I disappoint them by saying, sorry, that's not how it works. You're trying to break the system, right? The system is designed to sort of give you a little bit of a pointer saying, look, you need this much experience. You need to have prerequisites, right? If you don't follow prerequisites and you just go for a course, you're going to get lost in that course, especially a course like big data, especially a course like security. Those courses, they are super heavy on content. They are very difficult for students, first-time students especially, to follow. So definitely research your options. Go to our salespeople, ask them about these things. They can always put you in touch with a real person that does these trainings, like myself and other trainers, which will help you really get a better idea of am I ready for this course? Am I ready to take on this big challenge that I have here? So yeah, definitely. With the big data on AWS, there's so much content that for the 3rd day, the actual instructor guide says, try to convince the students to have a working lunch because we have about 8.5 hours of content that we need to cram into an 8-hour day, right? So that is something that is probably unique within the industry. I've done courses from a lot of different providers. I've built courseware myself, and I've never tried to cram 8.5 hours of content into an 8-hour day, let alone into the last day of a very intense training overall, right? I'm not trying to scare you. I'm not trying to not sell you the AWS Big Data course. It's a great course. It's got great content. And if you get a great trainer, that trainer can really make a difference, right? Because they can steer you through the fields that matter to you, right? Then we got the security specialty. Again, this one says all you need is fundamentals. Optionally, you can take the cloud practitioner exam. I would say go for architecting. Oh yeah, we got architecting here. Sorry. So architecting on AWS is your core course that you have to take, right? The architecting course will sort of prepare you for that. Between the architecting on AWS and security on engineering on AWS, you have the opportunity to do the AWS Associate Architect, Systems Architect certification. And of course, then once you start ready to think about security, once you got about 5 years IT security experience, once you got 2+ years on AWS, then you go for the security engineering course on AWS. That course will set you straight, set you on a path to getting certified, right? Set you on a path to start using the tools that are there in a much better manner, right? There's a lot more detail on how to use IAM. There's a lot more detail on security features on the network security in AWS. Then again, you've got an exam readiness course, and of course, then you go for your security specialty. And specialty number 3, these are sort of the base specialty courses that have a well-defined, very well-defined learning path. It's the networking specialty. Now, this one doesn't really have any prerequisite, right? It says 5 years experience of architecting and implementing network solutions and strong knowledge on AWS. What is strong knowledge of AWS? I say it's 2 years. It's a professional tier DevOps, professional tier systems architect certification. It is having the ability to identify all of these tools that are being used in AWS, right? People with 3 years experience in networking come up and say, do you think I'll be able to pass the advanced networking specialty? And I tell them, yeah, you will, sure. Here are the prerequisites, right? You got to learn AWS. You got to have confidence with AWS. You got to get 2 years experience in AWS, and then you'll pass. Not a problem at all. right? And then you're like, oh, no, I want to pass with my current knowledge. Well, you probably won't be able to because you'll have to learn at least enough about AWS to be confident when you talk about, oh, this is how the network works in AWS. You have to be confident enough to be able to go to the Q&A section of the AWS website and answer each and every Q correctly, right? All right, what was this one? Okay, so is this duplicated? No, oh, sorry. All right, so machine learning path. Now this one is a bit complicated, as you can see. It sort of has you covering everything in AWS, right? So basically, machine learning exam basics is just this sort of really basic course that shows you the basics of the machine learning exam. It's an online delivery that you can take. And then, of course, you go to the process model for CRISP DM on AWS Stack. Then you take the elements of data science. Now you're at the big data on AWS level, right? So essentially, if you're starting with a previous certification like big data on AWS, you can skip all of those, right? But then definitely take the storage deep dive for the machine learning path, because the storage deep dive will really give you a good foundation of how to store the data, right? A lot of times people focus too much on the machine learning tools and not enough on the infrastructure. And then they're sort of not getting the performance out of their training models that they would like, right? So why is that? Well, it's because you're using the wrong type of storage. You're not configuring the storage correctly. The storage is being overwhelmed by what you're trying to do here, right? Storage is still sort of the third tier of cache inside of computing, right? The first tier of cache is the cache that you have on the actual CPU, right? That's a cache that works at the CPU speed and it's the fastest possible. But of course, for large data sets, you can cache, megabytes of data into the CPU. And then the second tier of cache is your memory, your RAM, right? Right now, RAM is in the terabytes sort of sizes. But of course, storage or object storage or any kind of attached storage is in the terabytes to petabytes sizes, right? And S3, for example, unlimited sizes, right? So if you want to really store a big amount of data, you still have to use storage and you have to configure it correctly. Very important class. Machine learning security, another important class that will lead you to the basics of developing machine learning applications. Now, the machine learning applications is an advanced level course. So here, you got to have at least a few years of experience within the field itself, right? Because it's going to talk about different programming languages, going to talk about solutions that you can use to work with machine learning applications. Then a small little course, types of machine learning solutions. So it's got an overview of what kind of machine learning solutions you have. And then the three courses that are going to be sort of, that you're going to sort of working with, chatbots, you got computer vision theory and machine translation and NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. So these courses are the prerequisite that you need to cover all the knowledge required to go for the machine learning specialty exam. Now, there is no prescribed timeline, there is no prescribed required experience, but as you can see from the learning path itself, the level of knowledge that you need to attain to be able to pass the machine learning specialty exam is quite large, right? It is the specialty exam that has the biggest scope. Now, I've started preparing for this exam, and I'm looking to sort of pass this exam in about 2021, right? I have all the other 8 exams that we've looked at. I have enough experience. I have experience with big data. So right now, I'm at the developing machine learning application stage, right? And I'm looking to gain that certification within 2021. So about a year and let's say, a year and a half from now, right? It is quite a task. And if you are already very deep into developing these solutions, then of course you might be at the end stages and you might just need 6 more months or whatever. I find that this course is probably the most demanding with the range of different types of requirements that it has, with the range of services and systems that you need to know about, with the ability to actually develop applications for machine learning. It is quite a daunting exam. All right. So at this point, we'll take a 10-minute break to let all of this knowledge sink in. So it is 2:42. Well, let's say it's 2:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Eastern Daylight Time. I don't know which one it is. Eastern Time. Let's just call it Eastern Time. So we'll continue this session in about 10 minutes or so. That means that we'll be back at 2:55 p.m. And of course, if there are any questions, if you want to talk about something that I haven't mentioned yet, something I haven't covered, please let me know in the Q&A, and we'll cover and try to answer all your questions when I get back from break. All right, see you in about 10 minutes, 12 minutes. All right, everybody. Let's look at some accelerated learning. So basically what we do in WebAge is we focus on making sure that we meet your goals, right? Basically, meeting your goals means we look at what you have right now, we take a look at your staff, we take a look at the gaps in knowledge, we fill those gaps with knowledge, and then we can produce accelerated learning paths for those people. And they can really learn fast and learn efficiently with the tools that we've sort of created to get you started really fast. We're not saying that we're breaking the system and we're not giving you the experience required. We're actually giving you an accelerated version of gaining experience through our systems. So what is the problem with certification with AWS, right? It can be very, very time consuming, right? Out of the box, coming into a role, asking you to have 0 years of IT experience and have AWS certification, that's not going to be possible. You need to have multiple years of IT experience to be able to understand services within AWS and how they compare with the on-premises services. And then, of course, you need the real-world hands-on experience with AWS. Again, multiple years for some of these certifications, right? This can be a problem. So the cloud adoption conundrum comes up, right? So cloud adoption comes along as a business goal, right? We want to adopt the cloud. Everybody lacks hands-on experience with the cloud. So nobody has the experience with the cloud. They might have experience with the any kind of internal tools, any kind of corporate tools. The business requires the staff to be certified before cloud adoption, but before they're certified, they can't use the platform, right? So again, this is something that happens in a lot of businesses where they set out a goal saying only whoever is certified as an AWS administrator, Sis Ops, or solutions architect can use the AWS platform, right? And of course, that can prolong or even make the cloud adoption fail. With the AWS cloud adoption, you have to understand that having the access to the AWS environment for learning is crucial, right? It shouldn't be just for people who are already certified. It should be for everybody. We're trying to democratize the use of cloud by giving everybody the ability to use the cloud, right? So basically, how do we do accelerated learning at WebAge? Well, first, what we do is we have a custom approach to getting the right information from you, right? We need to get our baselines covered. We have a checklist internally that we look at, and we look at that checklist. We look at what your goal is. We look at what your requirements will be to meet that goal, and we look at where you're at right now. Sometimes the actual analytic part takes a few months, right? To analyze the state, to get everybody assessed, to do the skills maps, to do different types of approaches to build that sort of projection. And then we'll give you a realistic projection of success, right? We won't tell you, come to our course and you'll be able to pass the exam, right? We can do that, not a problem. That's completely doable. We can get you into a classroom, give you 400 questions, you memorize the 400 questions, we send you off to the exam, you're going to pass. But is that going to prove your knowledge? Is that going to prove your capability to use these tools? It's not, right? So we don't want to do that. We want to get you actually working. We want to have you be able to use AWS and then go to the exam and pass it, right? Pass it because you have the knowledge, not pass it because you have to pass it. So what we do to accelerate the learning, to decrease the requirements, is we can add custom projects after each and every training, right? The custom project is sort of what you do in the labs, except you have less instructions, right? You just have instructions. This is the business case. Build it. And then you have a day or two to do that custom project, right? Depending on what kind of setup we have. And in that day or two, you have to architect your solution, you have to develop the code, you have to build it, you have to deploy it, you have to have a proof of concept ready. And then after day two, your mentor comes along and does the assessment, right? In the assessment, they'll score you, they'll tell you, these are your strong points, these are your weak points, right? This is where you did good, this is where you didn't do really good. This is what you need to focus on to learn to get to the right track. So by doing the custom project, we actually give you the ability to focus on what matters. If we look at the general recommendation for an associate level exam, we'd say, yeah, you need 1 year experience with all of these systems. But maybe you know some of them already very well. Maybe it's something you work on every day. Maybe EC2 instances. You deploy them every day. You manage them every day. You know the ins and outs of EC2. But you're not that familiar with S3. You're not that familiar with SQS. You're not that familiar with other tools inside of AWS. So with a custom project, what we can do is we can assess where your strong points are, where your weak points are, and give you guidelines what to learn. We can repeat those projects as many times as necessary. So the faster we want to get somebody to take the exam and pass, the more projects we will need to do, right? And these projects, they can be very efficient, very time-saving. Another option is hackathons. What we do is we set up a hackathon, we set up a training, and then after the training, the teams, we form teams of maybe 3 or 4 individuals, and those 3 or 4 individuals will be working on a task. That task can be very, very varied, right? So different types of tasks. And within the hackathon, what the teams do, they sort of compete with each other. Not necessarily compete. We can actually make it as a competition, or we can make it sort of just, friendly rivalry, right? And these hackathons, they help, again, prove that the knowledge is there, right? With the custom project, you always have access to your mentor, and you can always ask questions. With the hackathons, you're left alone, right? So that's sort of the top level of, you have to know it all already, right? With the hackathon, we basically give you a sort of accelerated knowledge gaining experience, right? You really get to learn fast. We also give everybody the recommendation to use the free account. So AWS comes with 12 months free account, and we give everybody a recommendation, and we give you some pointers on how to use the free account, how to open a free account, and how to use it on your own time, and how to accelerate that learning. And of course, number 6, build it and then try to tear it down, right? Learn how it works by trying to break it. That is a really, really good way of doing things. And depending on your needs, depending on your timelines, depending on how fast you want to adopt the cloud and how fast you want everybody to be certified, we can cut down these times, experience times by 50% or even more sometimes, right? But you will still need multiple months to get from 0 to hero, right? Possibly a year, even more than a year. It's not as seamless as going into a classroom, getting out of there and passing the exam, because nothing can really replace the stuff that happens on the job, right? Anything that happens on the job is invaluable. Tips and tricks. First tip and trick, experiment, right? Try it out. If you want to see how it works, go there, use it. Use it for a few days, see how it works, try to break it again. Once you're at the point where you're thinking, I've got the experience, I've taken the courses, I'm ready to take the exam, I would recommend you to get some sample questions, right? For each and every exam, you get a sample exam of 20 questions that you can buy from AWS before you go for the real exam. Why do you want to use sample questions? Well, you want to use them because they will show you the way the exam is structured. You will see the structure of the questions, and you can sort of get used to how each question needs to be answered. Number 3, take your time. Take your time, but also hurry up, right? So why do I say take your time and hurry up? Because when you're reading a question, take your time and read it carefully. But then if you don't know the answer immediately, if you don't know the answer within the first 20 seconds after you've read the question, you're probably about a minute or a minute and a half into this question. You have to realize that most of these exams are timed so that you have about 2 minutes per question. So for example, the 65 question courses, exams, they're between 150 and 170 minutes. So that gives you just over 2 minutes per question. If you're stuck on a question, if you don't know the answer, mark it for review, skip it, and go to the next question. Don't get stuck on a question. I've had people get stuck on a question for 10 minutes and not be able to even read all the questions, to be able to answer the ones that they probably knew and would have been able to pass, right? If you only go through 50 questions, you have a way smaller chance of passing than if you go through all 65 but still have 10 questions that you've marked for review. And of course, keep calm, right? Try not to be nervous. Try not to overthink this, right? You got it. If you've got the experience, if you followed the guidelines that AWS sets out, if you followed our approaches, if you've gone through the project, if you've gone through the hackathons, if you read some sample questions, you're going to pass. We guarantee that. Definitely. All right. That brings us to the end of this presentation. And I'm going to take some questions now. We had one question that came up during the break. And the question is this meeting going to be recorded somewhere? Yes, it is recorded. You've got the audio that's going to be sent out. You're going to have a link to the audio that's going to be posted on our website. And of course, it will be available for quite a few years. So you can review it anytime you want. Also, the presentation itself will be available as a download, as a PDF later. Probably later this week already, yeah. Later this week. Both of those will be coming in later this week. As you can imagine, going through the publishing process, it takes a few days for everybody to, take a look at all the ins and outs of publishing. It's not a simple process. All right. I'm going to ask if there are any questions at this point. Did you like the presentation? Did you get everything you wanted to get from this day, hour and 15 minutes? All right. If there are no more questions, I would like to thank you. It's been my pleasure. Again, I'm Marko Sluga. I'm one of the trainers for WebAge Solutions. My focus is mostly cloud with a big focus on AWS. And yeah, if you're going to be joining any AWS courses anytime soon, you might actually get me as a trainer or any of our other trainers that work with WebAge. All right, here's our contact information. If you want to call us from the US, it's 215-517-6540. If you want to talk to us in Canada, we got a toll-free number, 866-206-4644. Of course, those numbers are going to be answered within business hours. If you need anything else, send us an email. I think it's info@webagesolutions.com. You'll be able to get somebody to respond to you also in that manner. And again, thank you very much for attending. It's been my pleasure, and I hope you got everything you wanted to know about certifications. And if not, please ask a question, and I will answer your questions at this time. All right, I'm going to keep this session open for about 5 more minutes. If any questions come up, if no questions come up within 5 minutes, then I'm going to end this session and I'm going to thank you and bid you farewell.